to another episode of the Decision Hour. I'm Adam, and with me, as always, Patty.
Adam, how's it going?
It's going pretty good. Thank you for asking. I'm excited about today's guest. I've known him for several years. He's no stranger to the Decision Hour. We've had him on the show a couple years ago, and he's agreed to come back and join us again today. He is a Marine Corps veteran, an entrepreneur, an author, and all around just a great guy to talk to. So I'm gonna, without further ado, Patty, if you don't mind, I'm gonna bring him on right now, Mr. Sean Jensen. Sean, how you doing?
Hey, good morning. How are you guys?
Good. So
really good.
Hey, Val, thanks for having me back on the show again. It's always good to talk to you guys.
Absolutely. Sean, I think Patty came on a little over a year ago now, and her and I we've had a blast together, and we've accumulated a lot more listeners since the last time you were on the show. Why don't you tell our new listeners that don't know who you are a little bit about yourself?
Well, I'm a Marine Corps veteran and entrepreneur, and recently, about 4 years ago, I decided to share my story, starting a CEO, which is if I recall correctly, that was what kind of attracted your attention to me in the first place. I'm author of the book Starting a CEO, of Foster Kids Lessons in Family Fidelity and Financial Success. So, I've been, I'm really kind of a behind the scenes guy, but it's kind of hard not to stay off the spotlight these days. We've had a pretty good string of successful events, and now heading into my 18th year in business as an entrepreneur. And, my story, itself sort of begins when, I was a foster kid and was abandoned very young, as you might remember, and ended up being adopted and leaving home, and then joining the Marine Corps to go find myself. And so, that's kind of the Starting a CEO book, and how that starts out, and then just kind of transitions about. It's not really a how-to book. It's just, a story as a seafaring person and a Hawaiian, and with that kind of a background, we'd like to tell our lessons through stories. And so that certainly got us on to the show. And Starting a CEO has kind of become I don't know what you want to call it, a cult classic. It's not really a New York Times bestseller. It's more about, combating life and the things that I did, transitioning out of the military and not so military friendly times.
Right.
And then starting a business and being successful at it. So, I think from my standpoint, it's come a long way. I started a little Facebook page to introduce it, and that's been up for about 4 years. And I don't know, it just has a small following. I think it's 42,000 people or something that follow the page. And I just, put daily motivation up. Small
following,
on life, and
42,000. That's a lot, Sean. That's a lot of people.
I'm not really counting, but I think that there's room for, people like me in the world who, you just have a different perspective. I call it the camouflage approach to life, where, I'm hiding right in plain sight, and half the time they miss me coming and going. So I kind of enjoy that part of it, the anonymity. But so, here we are again. Obviously, you heard that we had a pretty big win with one of our federal contracts. Most recently, probably one of the largest veteran-owned, service-able veteran-owned business or company business wins in the federal government in the construction category.
Okay.
And so we're pretty stoked about that. And
congratulations on that again. That's a huge win. And I was just going to ask. So obviously you're is it a contractor, or is it a general contractor? Is it the correct terminology? Correct me if I'm wrong. But you do contract work.
So
you own a contracting company.
Go ahead.
You own a contracting company of construction. Yes.
Yes, that's correct. I mean, what we do mostly, we work a lot with DoD and various acronyms across the board, and for the past 18 years, we've been working across the world, whether it's throughout the United States, Hawaii, Alaska, Puerto Rico, St. Croix, Afghanistan, Canada, Cuba. We've been around, so
Wow.
just quietly making our mark on the planet, and it's been exciting. So, mostly we do general construction, and then we have a division that does environmental cleanup, and then we have another section of the company that does advisory services for Army and Air Force medical programs across the country. So we're sitting around, I want to say, as of today, we're about 85 people.
Wow. That's awesome.
So I have
Yeah.
a question. When did you start contracting, and when did you say in your mind that was something that you wanted to do? And tell us what happened when you found out that you won this big contract with the government.
Well, for me, when I was my last duty station was Quantico Marine Corps Base, and as a sergeant, I was slated to go to the rifle range and teach weapons. But when I was overseas in Japan, I'd started learning about hazardous materials and chemicals and just the requirements that were all the regulations. And I really found that exciting in the emergency response aspect. So at my last duty station, I talked with the career planner and got a lat move on my own, and basically ended up going over to seeing the commanding officer of the environmental resources division of base, and like a job interview. And I came in and told him and said, hey, I've been around the world. I've done a lot of cool things, but, this is the career I want to follow on the outside. And as interviews go, he asked me, what my goal was. I think I had a couple years left in the Corps at that time. And I told him that, I wasn't planning on reenlisting, and that I was, going to start a career as a, civilian. I'd recently been married and just was ready to go, I joined right out of high school. So, did a 6-year run in the Corps and then an active duty. And then, so this guy hired me. And what I didn't know is that he was also, he was a VMI grad, and me and him were the two only green suits in the office, and the rest were civilians. So that's sort of how I learned about contracting and dealing with government officials and learning how projects worked and doing that process. So for 2 years, the major, he would send me over, brief the commanding general, try to get me over all these little fears that you have of officials that that were in high places, and so he put me to work, and he trained the heck out of me, and so when I left the Marine Corps, not only did I actually enjoy my time in, but I got to learn an incredible set of skills. A lot of it was just learning about people and understanding that there was a career after service. And in my case, when I exited, I actually didn't do that well. I mean, I realized real quickly that sergeants without a college degree don't make a lot of money. So in my case, I went to work for a construction company making, I want to say, like $13 an hour. I was excited about it, and I took that Marine Corps attitude and just did everything they told me to do. And by the time I was done with them, after like 3 years, I was running $68 million worth of Getty Petroleum projects across the Virginia, Maryland, DC area, doing all the field work. And I was only making $14 an hour. So go figure. They got a deal out of me. Then after that, I kind of got the company hit some hard times, and got laid off in the middle of winter and tried to decide, what my next path was going to be. And I knew I had to go up. So I used, a kind of a stepping stone mentality. And I got a job as an operations manager for a chemical response company. And then I got exposed back into the federal government again. After the September 11th attacks happened, it was pretty crazy up here in DC, but then there was an anthrax attack up there in DC. You guys might remember the Hart Senate building and all that stuff. So here I am, the only guy that's had any dealings with the federal government, in this private sector hazmat company. And they sent me down there to negotiate the emergency response contract that would, help them get onto the job. So we were working with the Capitol Police, bomb squad units, and then all my Marine Corps training kicked in, and all those meetings that I did with the major and everything else. So I went down there and I landed these contracts, and probably about, I want to say valued at about $5 or $6 million over a period of time. And we put down there, I guess, close to 200 people. So not only did I write the contract, I negotiated the contract, I managed these 300 or so people. And then I was like, wow, I just, I'm 29 years old and I'm down here running everything. So
Jeez.
I kind of jumped from that and then, kept that in the back of my head. And then shortly after that, it was about in 2002, I went ahead and I started what would become Polu. And so, here I am today using all those techniques, I guess, and training and understanding I learned in the Marine Corps, and now probably one of the stronger, veteran-owned businesses in the federal marketplace, I would say.
Sean,
go ahead.
Let me ask you, when you decided to start your company in 2002, did you know that that's where you wanted to go in the federal work with the federal government, doing contracting for the federal government?
I did, actually. I mean, I knew that would be the best place to utilize all the skills. I mean, when you think about the acronyms and the thousands of pages of, government minutia out there, a lot of people get terrified. They send you 1,000, page contract and basically you're going to give your firstborn to them if you fail. So, but for me, I knew I could do it, and I just looked at it and just realized, what I need to do. So I got small jobs. I think my first job I got was like $13,000, and then I did it myself and I pushed the first drums, and my wife was skeptical but supportive. It took a lot of sacrifice, but I knew that's where I wanted to be. I felt comfortable in that zone. I've also done a lot of private work as well. Built 7-Elevens or, Fortune 500 companies worked with in the past, but still, for me, I wanted to be able to control my destiny. And the only way to do that was to, open my own business and be my own contractor.
What advice would you give somebody that wants to get into that realm and work and do contract work with the federal government? Because, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but maybe you can kind of elaborate, like, what's the process? I mean, recently the $2 billion contract, it wasn't just handed to you. I mean, there's a process that you have to go through, in a pretty lengthy one, if I'm not mistaken.
We actually competed against 90 other companies.
90 other companies.
Yeah.
Wow. So can you go into a little bit of, like, how does that work when you say compete? What exactly? They tell you the format of what the job's going to be.
Well, they'll put out a request for proposals. Okay. I mean, this was certainly something we had been tracking for a long time. Contracts of that size are advertised out there on the Federal Business Opportunity Network or websites. For us, we'd already been working at the National Institutes of Health is where we won the contract. We previously won a $800 million contract, and let me put that in context for you. So what the government will do is they'll put together these contracts where they'll whittle down those 90 companies, and then they'll put it out there to maybe 6 or 5 or 10 qualified companies, and then they'll compete for work on those tasks. So, I mean, while it is sexy, the $2 billion, I've never signed anything that big until recently. I never really, thought about it, but it's not guaranteed. You still have to earn it, which is fine by me, because if you know what your company is capable of doing,
right,
and you have the confidence. But getting back to the beginning, I think you have to take everything in small chunks, right?
Right.
So one does not walk in and go compete and win a $2 billion contract, let alone a $3 million or $1 million, and on their first try.
Right.
A lot of times, there's let me put it this way. A lot of times it'll take years before you win your first, government contract. What I always tell people, that if you're going to be an entrepreneur, is don't quit your day job until you're ready to go. And what I tell people is that, if you're starting a new business, make sure you have about 6 months of, capital to pay yourself or pay your bills saved. And then, start small. Go after the $20,000 jobs. I mean, if you look on these government websites, there's just about, I don't know, anything you can imagine out there, right? Painting fences, mowing grass. I like to use the mowing grass, story a lot, where, if you're good at something, stick to what you do. And I remember growing up, having a lawn mowing company, pushing the lawnmower around the neighborhood, but there was somebody in our church, his name was Harold Valentine. And the story I like to tell is he had like 8 kids, lived on a pasture with some cows and a small house. But old Harold was, he was pretty motivated individual. So, he started mowing lawns for people in the church. And then one year, you drive down the road and all of a sudden you see old Harold, he's got a riding lawnmower and a trailer. And then the next year you see old Harold with 20 guys and 2 trailers. And pretty soon the guy's mowing and doing the landscaping for almost every subdivision and neighborhood in the county, and became very successful because he did what he knew best, and he had the determination to figure it out, and ended up being a millionaire in the 80s. But that's kind of the approach I've always taken. So, initially I started with the environmental side of the house, and did small subcontract jobs for various big guys. And then, I connected a lot of the dots, and then I started priming projects myself. And so, the opportunities out there, you got to have the drive and the determination to do it. I think a lot of people have these high expectations that, the work is, if you're a veteran or a minority, or in my case, I'm both, Native Hawaiian and a service veteran, that is given to you. And I think that there's programs out there that certainly will assist you in getting those starts, right? And the SBA has a number of loan programs, or the VA has the Veterans First contracting program, where you register with the VA, you're a veteran-owned company, and then you're eligible once they verify your information, usually DD-214 or DD-213, 214, and or a VA letter. You go through that process, and then that makes you eligible to compete on veteran facilities, VA hospitals, or in our case, we just won a 5-year contract to do small projects for the VA North Cemetery. So VA National Cemeteries from North Carolina, all the way up to New York.
Wow.
A lot of people don't know, we recently completed some work around the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, Arlington National Cemetery. So Polokai, my company, we've kind of used the island hopping technique in the beginning. People wouldn't work with us, so we went where the work was.
Right.
And then eventually we built a reputation. But it can be done. I mean, there's a lot of successful people out there besides me that are vets and doing well. But how do you get to 2 billion? I will tell you that it's the culmination of everything I did at the very beginning. It's, doing those small jobs, gaining the experience, and stepping my way up as a company.
I just
go ahead, Patty.
Absolutely love this story because, you started out really rough when you were a kid and went through so many different things, and then joining the military, sounds like, gave you a lot of structure and that family atmosphere that, you needed. But hard work is imperative to get where you are. And I think so many people might just read a headline saying, oh, this veteran, he landed a $2 billion, contract with the government, but they don't realize all the hard work that you're pouring into it.
Hours and hours.
And yeah, so it's just amazing to me.
Well,
I think
the thing that maybe really turned my life around, when I talked about this in the, Sergeant CEO book, was those mentors. I think about Major Mock, or when I was a young terminal Lance Corporal, I think at that time, the running joke, I had like 24 months time in grade, and I'm just a kid, I just remember that 6'5" staff sergeant grabbed me by the back of the neck and said, do you want to be a leader? I was like, yeah, sure, staff sergeant. And, he changed my life in that sense, because, somebody saw something in me that I didn't know existed. And, certainly, having those seed daddies, as I might say, come in there and kind of square your way, really assists. And I use that approach, myself with, a lot of the folks that work for me. The age range is from 18 to 65, right? So you have to have all these different approaches with people, and what I try to do here, and I think what I've always considered our company a very family-owned company. I still get calls from people that worked for me 18 years ago telling me their story, or how they're doing, or they're getting married, or whatever. They remember that time that I kind of grabbed them on the back of the neck and gave them a little shake and said, hey, let's get our act together here. And, you lose some people along the way too. Some people that just, they're not going to conform. But, I think with the Sergeant and CEO book, it's a little different, because I think we're kind of behind the scenes when we got to compete for everything, so we, sometimes we feast and sometimes we famine. But I think what makes Sergeant and CEO a little different is it's not a combat story, right? We need the combat stories. We need to tell the stories overseas, and we need heroes, and we need to recognize those heroes that for the good work they do. But I think my approach with Sergeant and CEO was not so much recognition. I still like going to the grocery store and people not knowing what I do, and getting some bananas and going home to my wife. But I think with the Sergeant CEO story is really just shows that you can do it, right? So, a lot of people, if you look at the whole federal government and you go, well, it's impossible, right? How can I work with that? You really have to chunk it. You have to just, it's like fishing. You gotta go in there and use the right bait, and, be at the right time and right place, and then act, and that's what a lot of people fail to do, and I don't know. I would be lying to tell you I wasn't scared to death, sometimes, and in business, and that happens. And, when you're thinking about making payroll every week for, 80 people, or, when you start counting subcontractors and everything else, you've got to pay your subs and all that. So you're making somebody else's payroll too. So I kind of equate what I do as like being mayor of a small economy, when you're processing millions of dollars on a daily basis, making sure you're paying your taxes, making sure you got health and medical benefits. It's a lot of responsibility. But if you bring in the right people and train them, you become a unit. I think probably right now our company is about 40% of our firm is veterans. So, we've given a lot of opportunity to young vets and old vets too, for that matter. That's really an impact on society. I was excited about the win, and I know that, from my standpoint, to have that opportunity for the next 8 years, I look at it more of a sustainable approach where I'm not trying to hit a home run every job. I'm just going out there and doing the job. I
got to say, Patty, in talking with Sean and, over the years and just kind of following him, the one thing, he's a very humble person, and the advice and his story, so many people, those of you that are listening right now, I hope you take notes, go back and listen to the show again and take notes, because he's got a lot of great tips, tips that he shares. And Sean, I got to tell you, and I appreciate you taking time out of your busy day to join Patty and I and give us an update on what you're doing, and the advice that you've given, not only to us, but our listeners as well.
No, it's my pleasure. At the end of the day, I wasn't attempting to, get rich by telling my story. That was not the approach. The approach was simply, I remember transitioning out of the military and been given a 2 to 3 day TAPS class, which, today is still a joke in my mind. Forgive me, DOD, you'll just have to write me a letter or something. But, they spent millions of dollars, to train me, to be a weapon, right? To shoot to kill, to, kill to kill. That was the Marine Corps way, right? And to be an amphibious green monster. And then I think what happens is that, and nothing wrong with staying in and doing your 20, but at the same time, but a lot of guys are just enlisting for that one tour. And then they come back home and they're living with mom and dad, or they end up stranded wherever they're, at, and maybe made some poor life choices, or didn't make any choices and end up confused as to what to do. And I think for me, there was 2 critical moments that I remember very well, which was on my return, back to Japan and being stationed in the Marine Corps. I decided that I wanted to change my destiny, and I didn't have the fear to do that. So I went in and asked, and, what a novel idea. When you think about being in the military, you're told you go where Uncle Sam goes, right?
Right.
And you can't change that destiny. But then again, if you don't ask, how do you know?
Exactly.
Right? So I saw something that was more interesting than what I thought what I was doing, and more beneficial. And I looked at the Master Sergeant and said, hey, is it possible I can do this? And you never know. And so that's where I try to, tell people that if you start planning ahead and, start thinking about it, and don't try and do it all in one day, you'll eventually, reach a plateau. And a lot of people don't know about Polu. While we've, signed this $2 billion contract, we've probably, if we were to go back in our 18-year history, we've probably captured over $4 billion in opportunities. If you start adding up individual contracts. And so, my approach, like I said, was just to, I pay myself a decent wage, but it's not ridiculous. People, when they finally see the money, they steal from their companies. And a lot of times that's why businesses fail. But I instead invest in my people, and I invest in their training, and I make them the best that they are, so that we can go out there and win those opportunities. And I think that's kind of what separated us, with that Marine Corps, training mindset of being ready. So when the opportunity arrives, that you can go in there and crush it. And that's what Polu does really well.
Nice. Patty, you had another question?
Yeah, I just have one more question. How many employees do you have?
As of today, we've had a lot of new hires this fiscal year end. We're pretty swamped. We're sitting at, I think, 85 today.
Wow,
so
that's
I know
amazing.
I think we'll probably, when we look at our strategic plan again, we'll probably be around 100 next year. I'm pretty sure of that.
Congratulations to you.
Yeah.
You are
Thank you.
doing a
Thank you.
phenomenal job.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you guys, and feel free to, give me a ring anytime. I'll always make time for you guys.
Absolutely. Sean, we appreciate you, buddy. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
All
And you
right.
can call us anytime too. I'm speaking for Adam right now. I know he'll say the same.
Will do. Thank you for having me on the show today.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Folks, that's all the time that we have. Want to again thank Sean for taking time out of his busy schedule to come onto the show with us. Before we let you go, a quick shout out to Heroes Media Group, our home network. Go check them out. All the great shows. You simply go to www.heroesmediagroup.com. Until next time, for Patty, I'm Adam. You've been listening to The Decision Hour.